my amazing coaches.
Wait, where are you? Why am I double? What?
Thank you for bringing your own verve and spunk to this show.
Hey there, we're taking a brisk weekend walk with Michael Goldberg.
LinkedIn content creator herself. Miss Judy Fox, welcome to the show.
Woo!
Hey everyone, this is Michael Goldberg with tip number 4 of 10 tips in 10 days.
I have got a great guest on tonight, whatever.
Well, of course, now I'm the big picture and that moved.
All right. Hey there, all you LinkedIn livers. Happy Cinco de Mayo. It's Tuesday. It's 11 o'clock. And you know what that means? It's the LinkedIn Live Lunch Hour with Michael Goldberg. And today I've got a great guest on the lunch hour. If you could all pull up a seat, grab your sandwich, grab your cold beverage, and welcome Chris Joyner to the show. Hello, Chris.
Hey, Michael.
Good How are you?
I'm good. We are safe and healthy, the Joyner clan, and you know what? That's what we can ask for right now.
Nice. So I have to ask. So that was the first time I've done that trailer and showed the live world my new trailer. What are your thoughts?
I liked it. I just seeing it at the beginning and seeing some of the past guests that you've had on the show. And then also that groovy, that one little segment of you being with your sunglasses and felt like we were in the 1970s. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, there's a story behind that, which is, and thank you. Yeah, so I do a job seeker hotline show on Thursday afternoons at 4:00. And so it was a video I actually did last week. And we use the show. Have you ever heard of the Silvers? Remember Hotline? Do you remember that show?
I do not.
If you heard it, they also sang Boogie Nights. Do you remember Boogie Nights?
I do. Yes. Yeah.
Same group, same popular 1970s disco song. But no, we're glad to have you, and I appreciate that feedback. Let me know what your thoughts are out there in the comments section. Feel free to share with all your friends that we are on live. And so let's dive in. We've got an interesting topic today, Chris. But before we dive in on leadership, which is what your focus is, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about Joyner Advisory Group and what you have done and what you do to help leaders be successful.
Absolutely. So I started Joyner Advising Group about 2.5 years ago. I've been in the space of leadership consulting, adaptive leadership consulting for a little over 10 years. And you know what? I really, I'm really passionate about, just as everybody has a passion, my passion is helping people create alignment in their lives, whether professional or personal. I mean, I don't typically work with folks sort of at a personal level, but what we know from being human is that what happens in our personal life impacts our professional life, period. It goes back and forth. And so if we're healthy in our personal life, we're going to be healthier in our professional life and vice versa. So our mission is to help forward-looking leaders create alignment. And just as I want you to think about the panel of your car in college. Michael, I don't know about you, but my car in college was a piece of crap.
Oldsmobile Delta 88, baby, brown.
Yeah, there you go. Very nice. So I had a car and it began to show some rust in one panel. And being 19 years old, guess what I did about it, Michael?
You let it go.
Exactly. I did nothing about it. And over time, that rust, that panel grew weaker and weaker and weaker. And in fact, at one point, it began to chip away just by being bumped into. And I view that's kind of like misalignment within our organizations. When we have misalignment that is unaddressed, where we aren't on the same page, we're not pulling or rowing in the same direction. What happens is that grows and it becomes like that panel that was once strong over time, weaker and weaker and weaker. And so our passion is help people create alignment. And really how we do that is through one-on-one work, executive advising, coaching, as well as team development, whether it be strengths-based leadership or creating a culture of healthy accountability, which we might talk a little bit about later in your show, or visioning, strategic planning that's actually rooted in the organizational code, right? The story of the organization, and trying to live out who they are in the current strategic environment. So
I love it. I love it. So do you work with individuals within a company? So your target client is really companies that may be having some leaders that need a little, shall we say, touching up and molding and shaping to help them be better, because the company believes in them and they believe they have the right skill sets that just need to be tweaked.
Exactly.
Is that a good way to put it?
I think that is a good way to put it, because what we want to do, and I think a lot of executive coaches out there, leadership consultants would agree that the wrong frame or the least helpful frame is to think about executive coaching as some sort of disciplinary action for one of your employees. Doesn't mean that there's not some growth opportunity, but if the coaching or the advising is sort of being put on an individual, as in you are going to have this or you're not going to have your job, the chance of actually having a successful coaching relationship is pretty minimal at that point. And so we don't typically take that kind of work. It doesn't mean that there aren't some things that we're going to be working on specifically that the boss maybe says, I'd really like for you to work on them to be working on this, but it's not this, we're trying to repair or fix someone. It's more, they see something positive that they want to nurture and grow and develop in those leaders.
Excellent. So, and feel free, folks, if you got questions around leadership, or you're having, you have a leader that's managing you and you want to need help working through a certain situation, we got the expert on. So feel free to ask your questions. All right. So let's start with where we are today. So we've got all kinds of different situations, and we, definitely from the start, let's say, what are we at, 8 or 9 weeks ago? Basically 9 weeks ago, when all this thing really started to rear its ugly head. You had people that were doing it right and leaders that were not really laying off or furloughing their employees the way they should. What have you seen out of this, in your opinion, of some of the more successful leaders coming out of this, without naming names or companies or anything like that? But what are some of the things that you've seen kind of all across the board, but which really stood out to you the most since the start of the pandemic?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Michael. I think about it like this, from my observations. There are leaders who go into protection mode, and they believe that their job is secure when they are able to protect folks. Now, is protection good? Of course, protection in many ways is very good, but it's got to be about protecting the right things. And the best leaders, and I've observed some of my clients living these things, the best leaders are understanding that they don't have control of what is going on. They cannot control that which is happening in our world right now. Now, we all have some decisions that we need to make, some choices that we make, and then behaviors that we want to model, right? Values that we want to live into, but we don't control it. And so those who have been honest and humble are the ones that I have been taking note of. Some of those are my clients, but others are people I've never met that I've watched them and heard them communicate. And I've been like, that is it. And what happens when we have as leaders, especially in crisis, when we are honest and humble, you hear that?
Yeah, no, kind of. I heard a little feedback there. So,
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, right, and it makes sense, right? So basically, when this thing broke, I mean, people they could go two different paths. They could go down the right path, which is be humble, be there, be over communicative, be
Right.
transparent. Where you had others who went into hiding, texted people that they were being furloughed, or did a pre-recorded Zoom call to say, hey, I'm sorry, this is so and so. No opportunities to answer questions, no communications, no transparency.
Right.
What in your mind? What of the people that took the left turn done? We know with the right turn, we already know that those are the people that are going to be remembered. But what have the CEOs that have taken that left turn and decided to do it the really not so good way? What should be the lessons learned that they get from all this? And how are they going to be able to make up for what they did, or are they?
Yeah. So those who took in that imagery, that left turn, like not the right way, but the left turn. What they did was they chose the easier way now, but it will come back, and it will be much more difficult in the future. In fact, one of the things when I'm working with clients or speaking to a group of people, leaders, audience, one of the things that I'm 99.9% committed to and believe is that in the moment, the right leadership activity is almost always harder than the poor leadership activity. And it takes more energy, more resources, more time, more humility, more curiosity to live into those things. And the easier decision is usually the wrong thing to do. But what we're doing is we're creating that trust that we need, right? That engagement, that trust is the best word, right? That connection that will pay dividends in the future. And so for those who have made some of the wrong decisions, here's what I would say. It is not too late.
Tell us how.
What's that?
Tell us why it's not too late, and how can they turn things around?
Not too late, because life is iterative. And here's what I know about people. When they believe authentically, or when they believe that a leader is taking ownership, responsibility for their misstep, people want to forgive. They want to say, hey, boss, everybody makes mistakes. Now, if we're Michael, big mistakes are harder to recover from. It takes longer time to live in a different value, a different first principle than a small one. You make a small mistake, it might take you 2 or 3 weeks, 2 or 3 months to recover. So, but I'm saying it's not too late. Do the right thing. And here's the thing. When we engage people in their own challenges, our challenges,
right,
even when we go a different way, if people have felt like they've been heard, they will usually say, I understand. I don't like it. It's hard, but I get it. And so engaging of people, asking real questions, creative questions, I was about to say something I maybe shouldn't say.
Not the BS questions.
Yes, thank you. Not the BS questions.
Right.
Real question that taps into something deep within people that allows them and helps them articulate it in a way that maybe they've never been able to articulate before.
Can you give us an example of what the questions and the responses are that you would say aren't BS qualified?
Yeah, I think that the BS meter is pretty low on questions like, let's take this time frame right now, right? This pandemic, this crisis. What if we really asked our people to talk about what has surprised them most about their colleagues? What is one thing that has surprised you about your colleagues? Or what's one thing that surprised you about your local community? Right? It gives them something a little different to think about. Every kid that comes home from school, which we all look forward to actually the day that we have that again, right? But every kid that comes home from school gets asked the same question by their parents. What is it?
How was your day? Or what did you do in school today?
Yeah. Often the
Nothing.
word, right? But how was your
Nothing.
day? How was school? And every parent gets almost verbatim the exact same answer.
Nothing.
Fine. Okay.
It's all
right?
right. Yeah.
Exactly. So part of what we're trying to do is break out of that mold of asking the same question that gets us the same answers. And I want to go back one last time to this. Part of our job, I believe, as leaders, is that we have to be able to help people articulate their fear, their anxiety, their frustration, their dreams, all of this. So that, especially when we talk about fear and anxiety, so that it no longer has control over them. That's our job, to help them articulate it. Not to tell them exactly what it is, but to help pull it out of them so that they have control over it themselves.
Right. Yeah. And you know, and that, so that brings up an interesting topic, the element of control. I think really just in this period, you know, my thought is that yes, the CEOs or C-level, even all the way down to like a VP or director level, an executive type that has to have some type of decision-making capability. They want to feel like they're in control. And this, of course, this whole thing is not to sit here and elaborate too much on it, but has forced their has really you know, it's like a poker game. It's been called. Let me see your cards and what you got. A lot of them fold, and a lot of them have shown their cards to say, hey, you know, while I don't have control, I'm here for you, and here's how I'm going to be here for you.
Yes.
You know, whether it's weekly messages or, you know, texting abilities to check in, you know, Q&A from, you know, Q&A town halls held with furlough employees. And I don't know if anybody's doing that. I have noticed, and I'll bring up the company because I just think it's brilliant. Hilton has done an amazing job. And I don't know if you've seen it, but it started with in the recruiting leader. Her name is Sarah Smart, who I know, very nice woman, and she stood up a website full of resources for those that were furloughed. And now, what I don't know is if the CEO is holding town halls or anybody's doing it, but that's one company I know it's doing it right. But I think that and you tell me, I'd like to hear your thoughts, and I'll shut up in a minute, is when leaders don't feel like they're in control, what are some of the natural tendencies that we see that the leaders that are listening to this or watching the replay on would say, all right, I need to start doing that? What are some of the tips there?
Yeah, I think so. There's a counterintuitive nature to this, right? Mm-hmm. That sometimes when we feel like we're losing control, what do we try to do? We try to gain more control than we ever had, and we just have to resist that urge. I've got, you know, my clients will tell you I've got, and they're probably tired of hearing it. I have many first rules of leadership, none of which is more important than first, do no harm. First, do no harm. And sometimes just stepping back and taking a breath, right? And saying, wait a minute, don't just react is huge. But I think that as we navigate things that we don't have control over, which is what we're doing, right? We're navigating this. It's iterative. It's day by day. We don't know. Here's what, and I want to go back to what you said just a minute ago. I think it was so insightful that when we don't know the answers, we don't have control. We need to be able to sort of have this tension between what is it that we do know, right? Whether it be, you mentioned checking in, we're going to do town halls, we're going to set up resources for our people, right? What is it that our deepest values, our most important first principles that we are going to continue to lean into? How can we say that? And then how can we celebrate the people, not ourselves, not us, but the people around us who are living out those values? How do we tell that story to encourage people and to hold up the values that we have, while also saying we don't have all the answers. We don't know what the next step is. But what we can tell you is we're going to do this while we continue to take the next step. This is what we're confident of. This is what we know to be true. But we're going to have to listen, and we need you to tell us, what are we missing? Where are we blind? We need our people to communicate that, and we are listening to you. I had a client out in the West who told stories during the time where we were developing their organizational code, and they came out with 5 core values. And they told stories over and over and over again during our time at the beginning about how they respect each other and they listen to each other even when they disagree. And so one of the 5 core values that emerged was, we hear you. We hear you. Ironically, it wasn't 9 months later that a board member had to actually they resigned, and then they tried to unresign. But they had to actually live into that value of saying, no, you violated that value. You violated it over and over and over again. I was there for it. And they were able to say, no, we can't allow that. We must say, no, you went too far there. You're still a part of us, but you can't be in leadership for a time period.
Yeah. And
Is any of that?
Yeah, no, I think that's good. And you bring up an interesting point. I mean, you got boards kind of behind the scenes steering the ship. And I think that they could be getting, let me ask you a question. Could CEOs be getting bad advice from their board on how to handle different things?
They could, and I'm sure some are. I'm sure some are. And listen, I empathize with the incredible accountability or potential liability that leaders have. And especially in this type of thing, especially when you start talking about furloughs and layoffs and all that, eliminating positions. I was talking last week with a client who they're looking at eliminating 20% of positions. These are eliminating positions, right? This is not, we're going to lay you off and then bring somebody. That position is no longer going forward with us, right? It's gone. The liability, and I'm glad we have checks and balances. I'm not making a statement on that, but that liability, I feel for it. So we have to again negotiate that tension, if you will, between these challenges we have that we have to be aware of organizationally, but also being able to be human. Be human. Recognize that what people are experiencing, we may not be able to solve all their problems or fix all of them, but just a recognition of it is so incredibly important. And
it is. The one of the things that I think is going to have serious repercussions, kind of tied to my world, is the leaders that have not done it particularly well are going to have a hard time putting something out there that, we're an employer of choice, and there are some big names out there that did it wrong, that really messed up their employer brand. And I think, honestly, I don't know. What's your thoughts? Is there a way for them to, are they going to ever be able to gain the trust back of any candidates that want to apply for their jobs, or no?
Right. So did you read the article by Mark Cuban, or where he was interviewed?
I have not seen that yet. No. What did he say?
Yeah. So in essence, organizations, right? Businesses, organizations, their reputation in the future is being formed right now. That may not be the verbiage he used, but that was the idea that I took from it. And I couldn't agree more. It is in times of crisis where we are, our leadership is forged. And as we move through this, I mean, when you think about both, and I like to talk about a leadership that is both humble and courageous. So sort of a courageously or humbly courageous leadership, which is we are going to take bold steps. We're going to make bold decisions, but we're going to do it from a posture of humility where we recognize we do not have all of the answers. And here's when I think about humility and curiosity, I think they're linked. And I think it's impossible to be curious without a level of humility, right? Which is, I don't have all the answers, but I do know certain things, and we're going to live into those. So here's what I would say. I do think, and this goes back to our conversation earlier in the conversation, I do think organizations can recover, but I believe they have to own up to their missteps, and they have to be willing to say, I was wrong. If I could go back, I would do that differently. And my heart breaks for the fact that people were hurt. And by the way, people are hurt by even good decisions. I want to be clear. There are good decisions that will be painful for people. That sucks, but that's life.
Right.
But they'll have to be able to say, I'm sorry, and here's what we're committed to doing in the future. I believe when we misstep as leaders, we have a great opportunity to actually build greater trust in our organization by how we respond in our failure.
Absolutely. And I think, so let's pare it down. Let me ask a really difficult question. In your honest opinion, of the people of the leaders and CEOs that really didn't do it the right way, what percentage of them are really going to admit and raise their hand to go, I screwed up?
Yeah, very few.
Right.
Yeah, very small percentage.
Yeah, and I think that really has an impact on who we are as who they are as a person. And really, it'll be interesting to see that the good leaders that really honed in on their departments, or if the CEO didn't do as well, but the COO really kept their operational people in. I would see there being a switch out of leadership, company leadership, based on how those humble and creative leaders showed up for their organization. Do you think you'll see a lot of CEO and board changes as a result? I mean, not to focus on the negative so much, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I don't the term a lot. I don't know.
Do you think? How about take out the word a lot? Do you think that there will be some changes to major companies of poor leaders because of this?
Yeah, I think this is an inflection point. It's sort of the impetus for some future, not so far in the future, but future changes. So will there be companies, small percentage of companies who say, we handled this poorly, or this leader handled it poorly, therefore we're doing X, Y, Z? Yeah, there will be a few, but there will probably be more. This is from my experience. There will probably be more who this was sort of that thing that they won't be able to get past. And in essence, there will be a time period of a greater rift, greater misalignment that leads to the ultimate sort of, leading of a senior executive or senior leader. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. So let's focus on more positive stuff here. So
yeah,
let's talk about, sorry to go down that rabbit hole. I think people want to know that and hear that. So that's why I dwelled on it for a little bit. So, but let's talk about the good. So there have been some fantastic examples of leadership that are playing out there. What are the good traits of a leader in this new world? What do you think? You've mentioned a few: the humble, the creative, the person that's not going to be all controlling and is okay with relinquishing the power of succumbing to coronavirus. What are some of the good traits that you've seen from some of your clients, or just in reading examples of excellent leadership? And what are those traits?
If I had to sum it, I mean, there's so many good things that I think about there, Michael. We could talk. I could talk probably way too long. At least my wife would say way too long about that.
Right.
I would say that some combination, and these are interconnected, interrelated, of emotional intelligence and what Edwin Friedman called, he was a psychologist. He was also a rabbi, I believe. He's now passed away, but he's an author. And what he called the well-differentiated leader. And if I have a couple minutes to unpack that, that'd be helpful.
Go for it.
So this is a very dumbed down version because of the transmitter, the communicator, not because of the receivers. The well-differentiated, so let me back up. So many people, when we're not defined in ourselves enough and well-differentiated from others, we're in community, we're in beautiful relationship, we're in challenging human relationship, but we have this well-differentiation, a confidence in who we are and who we're to be, okay? When we have that, we are able to remain connected to anxious systems within which there is anxiety. And that's redundant if we say human systems, right? There's a redundancy there. There is anxiety. So what happens is we're able to remain connected within relationship and within systems where there's anxiety without choosing to separate from said system or being completely enveloped in the anxiety itself. Okay. Now, the poorly different, sometimes it's easier to look at the other side, right? The poorly differentiated leader is the poorly differentiated person. Okay. But I deal with leaders primarily, is the one who gets absorbed by the anxiety of the organization. And what happens is once the anxiety gets so high, they get to their breaking point, and then they say those two words: I'm done. I'm out, right? And then they separate. So think about the family relationships, sisters who haven't talked in 10 years, parents and children who have no relationship, people in the workforce who have no relationship with a colleague. So what happens is we get to that anxiety point, we say, I'm done. And then we break away. And the first time we break away, it's for a month. But what happens is over time, we come back to the anxious system. The anxiety rises again. We get to that breaking point because we're poorly differentiated. And we say, I'm done. I cannot handle this anymore. You're always the same. You do the same thing all the time. You do X, Y, Z. You always, you never. And then we break away. But this time we don't break away for a month. We break away for 3 months. And before you know it, now we have this rift that never is repaired. This happens in relationships all the time. So the well-differentiated leader understands who they are enough that they're willing, as Heifetz and Linsky from Cambridge Leadership Center, they're willing to disappoint people at a pace that they can tolerate. And let me be clear. You cannot lead without disappointing people. It's impossible, because leadership requires change, movement forward, progress, and change always involves loss, always. Even good change involves loss. And we always, as humans, experience the loss from change before we experience the benefits of change. And that's why change is so damn hard for us.
It really is. And what's interesting here is my dogs are about to bark because someone's going to drop something in the mailbox. But I think that was a surprise. I guess change. I've always been okay with change. There are a lot of people that aren't okay with change, but I can clearly remember one CEO who pretty much said, "Look, train's leaving. you can stay on the train. We'd love to have you a part of this ride, but you can get off the train too. It's up to you. But this is where we're heading, and many of you will love it. Some of you are going to hate it. But if it's not for you, it's okay
Right.
if you don't want to be a part of this organization, and
Right.
you have choices. Right now, people should not be arguing that right now because there aren't many choices.
Sure.
I think it's an important point. You can't really say, hey, the train's leaving, you're either on or you're off. You would never formally say that, but you could put it more delicately to say, look, this is where we're heading, and
Yeah.
I want every one of you to be a part of this. But if you don't feel like this is where your skills or the new culture, the new values that we're rolling out in this new world, then you do have that option. And we don't want you to leave, but you have the option.
Yeah.
In so many different ways. So we do have a comment here from my good friend Owen Shirk. He says, I think great leaders remember that a team working well together is 80% relationship and 20% work. And I fully agree with that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you said Owen. I would agree with that, and that's that emotional intelligence piece. And most of our jobs, our organizations, our businesses, we have the expertise to do the job. Most organizations have the expertise in-house to do the job they need. I'm not going to say 100% of the time, but the vast majority, for the majority of the time.
Right.
What gets in the way of us being centered and aligned to our mission and accomplishing that mission is almost always human relationship. And it's so hard. And why, Owen, Michael, it's hard because I'm stupid sometimes. I mean, I really am. I live in the South. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and there's a country song, and obviously country all over the country, but all over the radio. But there's a song. God is great, beer is good, and people are crazy. Let me be clear.
And who's that by? I'd like to listen to that song.
It's a great song.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Here we go. The fallacies of working from home. How's that thought?
So with Owen, I agree. Human relationship and human dynamic is so important. And when we get that right, we're almost always going to get the other 20% right. Almost always. So I agree.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm sorry, I didn't hear who that song was by. Who was that by? The beer is good.
God is great, beer is good, and people are crazy. I think it's Billy Cunningham or something like that, or Billy Currington, but I don't know for sure. I do know the song, and it's pretty funny.
I will have to look that one up. I think that's a good. That about sums it up, right?
It does.
It really does.
It does.
And look, it's okay to make. To your point, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to be what's the best way to put it? A leader that can make mistakes.
Yes.
That's how we learn. I think I think leadership is trial by fire.
Yes.
You want to think it through a little more, not lead to the fire, but anything you take a chance on, you got to go with it and be extremely okay with messing up and not beating yourself up. I think good leaders don't beat themselves up. They move on, they recognize it, they apologize for their mistake.
They do.
And they go into the next task.
They do. That's exactly right. And that's what we need from folks. That's what, look, not to get too personal, but we had this in a family conversation just yesterday where I had to say, honestly, my anxiety is what has led me to respond during this time with family at home, with high school, on hiatus or whatever, learning online. And I had to say to one of my kids, that's my anxiety. Forgive me. My anxiety has taken over this situation. And so that's why I'm responding, not out of my values, but out of my anxiety. And that's the well-differentiated leader, right? That I talked about, that Edwin Friedman describes. It's the ability to be driven by our values. And here's the thing, Michael, when we talk about making mistakes, when we make mistakes that are driven by our deeply held values, people will get it. They understand we're not perfect. But when we make mistakes that are antithetical to the values that we espouse, the ones we say we believe, but we don't look like we believe, that's when we have a big problem.
Right. So for the, and we got about 5 more minutes left here. So when this thing is said and done, 12 to 18 to 24 to 36 months from now, whenever that is, when people would just stay inside, please, and let this thing die out. But I don't think that's going to happen. What will will leadership be a lot different than it was before the pandemic than it is now? And if so, how? And focus on the positive.
Wow. Man, that's a really good question.
It's okay to say.
I do think it will be different. But I think we've been in a journey of leadership shift and change that's been fairly significant over the last decade. With technology and with media and social media, there has been a level of unwanted transparency, right, by some, but transparency, a level of transparency that actually has helped leaders, and I think especially our younger leaders. I mean, I coach 3 people who are right around 30 years old, and let me tell you, they're stars. They are phenomenal, and they are phenomenal. And
what are the traits? What are the traits that make them phenomenal?
They're so aligned with what they say they want. Like when they tell me, number one, all 3 of them come with an agenda. Like, and sometimes we don't even get through the whole agenda, but they come. There are a few leaders here and there, and I have to question them. I have to challenge them and say, do you really want to do this? Because we're just kind of kicking the ball around a little bit, right? I don't know if that's the right metaphor.
Sure.
But these folks are on point. They're aligned, they're driven, but they're value driven. They're driven by who they want to be. And that's powerful. Now, do I have some this is not a generational thing. I was just pointing out there are some all-stars coming up. And I think that they grew up in, of course they have their own challenges, but they grew up in a setting, right, where you had to, if you were misaligned or if you didn't live out what you espoused, people knew it, right? And so I think that's a good thing. So I do think that there's some shifts. It's been a shift I've been seeing. I think we'll continue in that direction of greater transparency, healthy accountability. And I think that when we have healthy accountability, it not only serves our organization and its bottom line, its sustainability, it also serves our best folks. And when I say best folks, don't think only the high performers. I'm talking about the people who are rowing in the right direction with us, who have great attitudes, who want to see their team succeed, their people succeed, and the organization succeed. But I think that healthy accountability also helps the people who are being held accountable.
Yeah, no doubt.
People who have served me best in my life are the ones who held me to a high standard, even when I didn't want them to.
No, that makes sense. That makes total sense. So, we haven't had many questions today. We've flexed up and down, and in terms of listeners, but it's good. I think this has been a fantastic conversation. We did have Ahmed from Pakistan, Karachi, Pakistan, listening. So we thank that. Owen Shirk, thanks for listening today. I'm sure there are many people that just were shy, or maybe they were working and just kind of listening in. So, but I really, Chris, have enjoyed this conversation. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Well, they can go to joyneradvisinggroup.com. They can also email me at chris@chrisjoyner.com. So I know that's a couple things there, two different things, or info@joyneradvisinggroup.com. So I'm on LinkedIn. Please come connect with me. And I really, I'm passionate about healthy leadership. I'm passionate about leaders carrying the right weight. Leadership is heavy, but so many leaders carry the wrong weight. My job in helping them create alignment is to remove the wrong, or help them drop the wrong weight so that they can effectively carry the right weight. And that's what I am driven every day to do that. So and come and engage with some of the writings and challenge my writings on LinkedIn or Business Journal. Challenge me. I need to grow. Challenge me.
Absolutely. And so, Chris, you've been a wonderful guest. I really appreciate you hopping on the lunch hour with us. And for those job seekers out there, if you need to connect with me to talk about your job search strategy, just hit me up on LinkedIn or on any one of the channels that we're coming live to you on. You can also reach out to me at michael@hiringtransform.com. And Chris, enjoyed the show. Thanks so much. I'm glad that everyone's safe and healthy in your family out there in Charlotte. And so we'll talk to you soon, and we'll see everybody back on Friday for another edition of the LinkedIn Live Lunch Hour with Michael Goldberg.
Thank you.